Chance is a hardworking student with a passion for her mom's cooking, so she thought, why not apply to the nutrition department at college so people can love my mom's food and I can make it famous? Her father is a devoted man who loves his family, and her best friend has been with her since childhood. They both saw their acceptance results and were thrilled as each got into the department they wanted. On the first day of college, Xiom also joined her department. He's secretly in love with her but acts like a best friend just waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, they ran into Jin, their friend from school, and the three decided to form a close-knit group. One day, they were leaving a lecture when the popular clique of guys passed by, surrounded by girls from every direction. In the commotion, someone bumped into her and her phone fell. Poor girl went crawling on her stomach like a lizard to get it, only for one of the guys to step on it, shattering it completely. She ran after them, aiming to grab one by the hair but ended up grabbing the wrong person. Someone important at the university. She got scolded so harshly it could last her a year. When she told her friends, they had no idea who those popular guys were and why they had a crowd around them. Then, Shiji from the journalism department came along and said, "You guys must be new here," and took them on a tour to explain who those guys were. It turns out these guys are famous for their looks, charisma, and their unbeatable skill in a game called bridge. No one has been able to beat them yet, so naturally everyone wants to join their clique. First up is Miso, sharp and witty with a killer sense of humor. Then there's Shimin, the mysterious one that no one can figure out. It's hard to tell his front from his back. Next is Woozy, a music lover and a chill guy. Lastly, there's the most important one, the gang leader, smart, handsome, and can get money out of thin air. He made 1,000,000 yuan at just 18. He also plays a game called Bagram, making people fear him. Long story short, no one dares challenge them unless one of the four sends them a joker card, as they're used to people trying to challenge them but don't let just anyone in easily. If someone does manage to beat them, their punishment is intense. They might make you clean all semester, or stand in the fountain and embarrass yourself, or even lock you in the lab at night. Devilish stuff, really. Once, Chance, feeling brave, tried to approach Daoming to demand an apology for breaking her phone, but he told her, "Stay away, sweetheart, or you'll get soaked." Then he added, "That haircut of yours doesn't exactly make me take you seriously." So she was bringing a cake for her friend Jin's birthday, but suddenly she nearly tripped, and the cake ended up all over his face. Our girl grabbed Jin's arm to keep from falling, but Mr. Curly Hair lost his temper and made a huge deal out of it. When she tried to apologize, he shoved her. But with Chance taking her bravery pills, she started giving him a piece of her mind, calling him big head and saying, "We're already putting up with your attitude, now you're taking it out on this poor girl?" He grabbed her by the collar and warned, "Don't say things you'll regret." True enough, he later placed a joker card in her locker. She went ballistic as she hadn't expected to get into this kind of trouble so early on, wishing he and his friends would turn into monkeys with nose hairs growing as long as their arms. Woozy, who was nearby, asked her, "Would you be happy if they turned into hairy monkeys?" She apologized, but he hadn't meant to scare her and walked away with a smirk like he was some kind of actor in a drama. Back home, her mom asked her to deliver a food order, only to find out that Mr. Curly Hair was the one who'd ordered it. Of course, he only did it to flaunt that he was helping her family, but she knew he was just bullying her and wouldn't let him drag her mom's cooking into it. She told him he thought he was smart and sophisticated, but in reality, he was just a drain on society. He couldn't take it and threw the food back at her. She left crying, and while washing her clothes, two guys came to bother her. But Woozy told them to leave her alone, and he comforted her as she cried, asking why Daoming was treating her this way. He then stood on his hand and told her, "If you feel like crying, stand on your hand and the tears won't come out." The next day she went to college, seeing no one but Daoming. She gave him a kick, which the popular clique thought was hilarious and wrapped him up like a mummy. Mizo even recorded a video saying, "This is Mizo from Egypt reporting our latest discovery. A mummy of a guy who got kicked by a girl shorter than him. Long live Egypt." When Daoming came to, he fumed, "This is the worst day of her life, I'm going to make her pay." But Woozy, their sweetheart, told him, "Dude, two guys harassed her after she left your place. What did you expect her to do?" Then they left him there, wrapped up. The next day, she passed by the music room by chance and saw Woozy playing, so she went in to return his handkerchief and thank him. But he wouldn't take it back, so she suggested he could see it again on the rooftop. He replied that he wasn't planning on going up there anymore, acting all cool as if he wasn't going to end up as the third wheel in the end. Later, as she left the university, she saw bodyguards coming to take her to Mr. Curly Hair, who wanted to apologize. But heaven help her. It was like she'd walked into Madame Fazia's salon. One was massaging her, another dressing her up, and yet another styling her hair as if he wanted to make her into a whole new person. She finished and waited outside, and when she saw a picture of him with his clique, her eyes lingered on Woozi. Just then, Dao Ming walked in, crossed his legs, and asked, "Are you interested in Woozi or what? Forget it, he's not for you." She replied, "He can belong to whoever he wants." Dao Ming then offered, "If you agree to be my girlfriend and stick with me at college, I'll buy you clothes and a new phone." Thinking he was a billionaire just throwing money around, she told him to shove off, along with everything coming from his side, and gestured with her shoe. The next day, as he passed by, he told his friends, "You know, Chance is obsessed with my teddy bears." They didn't believe him and joked, "Since she's so innocent, let's prank her and put cockroaches in her locker or scare her in the bathroom." Shimin and Mizo felt that was childish, and Woozi didn't respond at all, clearly not interested in playing such foolish games. At the cafe where she works, Shimin and Woozi came in to order something, and she was stunned, completely frozen, even after they had left. Back at college, she was staring at a map on the wall, trying to figure out which country it was. Woozi suddenly said, "That's Paris," and this time they actually talked and even joked a bit. They walked down together from the rooftop, and when her friends saw them, they told her not to get her hopes up, because he's in love with someone named Jing. Later that night, she saw Woozi at the bus stop, looking at a picture of Jing, who was apparently a famous actress. He turned to her and said she was beautiful, then kissed her on the cheek, leaving her totally lost in her daydreams, convinced he might actually like her. But as she walked by Dao Ming, he sneered, "Can't you see I'm passing by?" She replied sarcastically, "Excuse me, I'm just grateful you passed by safely," noticing he had even changed his awful hairstyle. He said, "I did this new look for you." She answered, "Well, a monkey's still a monkey, no matter what it tries to do." Her friend then came over and asked what was going on, and she shrugged it off, saying she was just laughing at a certain someone's ridiculousness. Just then, someone told Dao Ming that Jing had arrived at the school. She's the girl Woozi is in love with, and of course, the whole popular clique knows her. They all rushed to greet her, and when she hugged Woozi, it was clear he was smitten. The next day, she saw them together and decided to focus on her studies and forget about him. But Dao Ming wouldn't leave her alone. He asked her to come with him, but she declined, as she was going to eat with her friend Xiao. Each time he saw her with Xiao, he got angrier, until he finally sent Xiao a joker card to challenge him. She grabbed the card from Xiao and told Dao Ming, "Solve whatever issue you have with me without involving my best friend." He asked, "What do you even see in that idiot?" She replied, "He's better than you. At least he has a heart and a brain, unlike you." One day, as she was going to eat in the cafeteria, she saw Dao Ming and tried to avoid looking at him, but he came straight over. She quickly got up with her food, only to accidentally bump into someone who then yelled at her. Dao Ming stepped in to get the guy away and told her, "If you were with me, you wouldn't be dealing with this." He held her by the cheeks, but then Woozi came to help her and pulled her away. Dao Ming grabbed her other arm and asked Woozi if he liked her. Woozi just told him to let go, challenging him, and they both got personal. Dao Ming finally released her, saying to Woozi, "If you walk away with her, I'll consider you're no longer my friend." Woozi took her away, and in the restroom, Jing helped her change into clean clothes. When she came out, Xiao was feeling guilty for not being able to protect her and decided to start learning martial arts so no one would bother her again. Xiao then suggested they travel to another city for the upcoming week off, but she refused because she didn't have money for it. He assured her not to worry, as his family has a villa there and would be happy to host her. At home, she was lying on the bed when Dao Ming showed up to check on her. Her family was impressed by his looks and height, even though she told them to kick him out because he was the reason she was in this mess. Her family, however, didn't listen and invited him to sit and eat with them. He was polite, quite unlike his usual self, as if he wasn't the same guy who gave her trouble day and night. As she walked him out to see him off, he asked what she'd do over the break and suggested she join him. She declined, saying she couldn't afford a ticket, but he insisted he'd pay for her. She retorted, "Who do you think you are to pay for me? Besides, I'm already traveling with Xiao, so just drop it." The next day, she really did travel with Xiao and was amazed by his family's villa. They then went out to ride his father's boat. Feeling a bit overwhelmed by how big and expensive it looked, she asked if it was really theirs, but he clarified they'd actually be taking the smaller one. Just then, the popular clique appeared out of nowhere, like they always do. Jing invited her to join them at a party, but she hesitated, not wanting to cause any drama. Jing insisted, even taking her to find a dress. At the party, Daoming couldn't stop glancing at her and eventually approached. But suddenly the lights went out, and she accidentally fell on him. She quickly got up, wishing she could disappear because it was her first time getting close to anyone like that. The next day, she was passing by the group, and Shimin teased her, asking if she enjoyed her first stolen kiss. Annoyed, she brushed him off, but Daoming chimed in, saying she had intentionally fallen on him. She wasn't interested in their opinions, she just didn't want Woozi to misunderstand. But Woozi simply told her, "Honestly, I don't care whether you kissed him on purpose or not," so she rushed off. Xiao then went over to Daoming's house and challenged him, waving a slipper at him for forcing himself on her. Daoming just replied, "If it bothers you that much, let's settle this with a fishing contest. If I win, you'll regret it." They went fishing, but oddly, they spent the whole time talking about her. Daoming thought she was clueless, but Xiao argued she was more beautiful than he realized. Back at school, something important went missing, and the teacher wanted them to list people they suspected, but she refused to name anyone, confident her friends weren't thieves. She was punished that day for standing up for them, and from then on, she and Xiao became inseparable. Back at the fishing contest, Daoming caught a squid and made a big deal of it, while Xiao's bucket was full. When they returned to shore, they found her crying, though she claimed something just got in her eye. Xiao didn't miss a beat, boasting to her that he'd beaten Daoming, but Daoming's face suddenly turned red. Xiao laughed, saying, "You perv, are you thinking about what happened between you two?" and chased him down to hit him, making her laugh despite her frustration at their antics. After break, back at school, she opened her locker to look for her sneakers, but they were missing. Of course, curly-head Daoming had taken them and tried to wear them himself, ripping them in the process. She sighed and left them, figuring she'd be wasting her energy fighting him. Her friends teased him, asking why he was so eager to show off the torn shoes. He just said, "Be patient, I'm just luring her in. Once she falls in love with me, I'll dump her like the others." On the rooftop, she saw Woozi drawing, and she had a feeling he was sketching Jing. She noticed some chalk on his hair, and since he couldn't see where it was, she told him to lower his head so she could get it off for him. Just then, the sneaky girl who has a crush on Daoming was snapping photos from behind. She ran to show Daoming, saying, "Look at the girl who kissed you at the party. Now she's cozying up to Woozi." Furious, he stormed off. Meanwhile, she went back up to the roof to grab something she'd forgotten, only to find him there, carrying all his anger. He was starting to believe all the gossip. She tried to leave, but he cornered her against the wall and told her to stop playing games with him, which left her bewildered. He told her not to act innocent, punching the wall beside her. She was terrified and ran until she tripped. He grabbed her again, saying, "This is all because of you." She broke down, begging him to leave her alone, and at that moment he started to regret his actions, apologizing and promising he wouldn't hurt her again. Since then, whenever they saw each other, they'd avoid eye contact. She was scared to see him, and he felt guilty for what he'd done. Even his friendship with Woozi became strained. Woozi's friends asked him if anything was going on between him and her, but of course he had no response since they all knew he was in love with Jing anyway. On Jing's birthday, our girl was getting ready with her friend from school, planning to attend, and Xiao offered to drive them. They made it to the party and immediately headed to the buffet, ready to enjoy some treats, until she nearly choked on her food when she spotted Daoming walking toward her. Luckily, another girl came up to talk to him, giving her a moment of relief. Then Jing arrived with Woozi, and it was clear Woozi was planning to confess his love to her, just as his friends had predicted. They started dancing together, and as soon as the dance was over, he was about to confess his feelings, but Jing stopped him, saying she had something she needed to announce. She thanked everyone for coming to her birthday party, then declared she'd be giving up her position as the heir to her family's company to study law in France, where she wanted to help the poor. Her parents objected, but she apologized to them and even cut her hair on the spot to show she was serious and mature enough to make her own decisions. Seeing this, Woozi was heartbroken. He left the party in tears, and she ran after him to apologize, hugging him. Just then, 2 other girls came up to see him, so she returned to the party and started drinking heavily. Eventually, she left the party drunk, and Daoming saw her, initially thinking she was eavesdropping on him. She dismissed him, slurring, "Why are you pretending, you fake?" She suddenly leaned her head against him, and although he tried to push her away to avoid any misunderstandings, she ended up throwing up all over him. The next morning, she woke up confused about how she got home, but her aunt told her that Dao Ming had brought her. When she saw him at university, he asked her, "Aren't you going to say anything to me?" She acted nonchalant and replied, "You didn't apologize for what you did, so don't expect anything from me." He grabbed her by the collar and asked, "Are you happy now that Jing's leaving Woozi?" But the truth was, she wasn't happy at all. She went up to the rooftop to encourage Woozi to stop Jing from leaving if he really loved her. Sure, she was relieved at first, but seeing him downcast made her feel bad. So she even spoke to Jing, urging her to reconsider. Jing, however, stood her ground, determined to pursue her dream, and left. Woozi happened to overhear this and angrily scolded her, telling her to mind her own business instead of meddling in his private matters. She tried explaining that she was only concerned for him, saying, "Don't be so petty, come on." Later, they were all at the train station waiting to say goodbye to Jing. When Dao Ming showed up with a gift, Xiao insisted on seeing what was inside, but it turned out to be a silly prank. She thought to herself that Woozi would probably be happier if he was living freely like Xiao instead of being miserable over Jing. Dao Ming noticed her mood and asked, "Why are you so down?" She replied, "You wouldn't understand unless you've been in love with someone who's going through a tough time." When Jing arrived, everyone said their goodbyes, and right after, Woozi showed up. She got annoyed, asking him how he could come so late and miss the goodbye. Woozi, however, had taken her advice to heart and booked a seat on the next flight to France so he could see Jing again. He thanked her, giving her a quick kiss on the forehead. Xiao, who was watching, muttered to himself, "Seriously, it's just a forehead kiss. Chill out. You're acting like they're dating." As they watched the plane take off, Dao Ming tried to say something to her, but she couldn't hear over the noise of the aircraft. He didn't repeat himself and walked away. He had said, "Date me," without her realizing it. One day, Xiao received a message inviting him and our girl to play a game of bridge with them. She was nervous, knowing they'd likely lose, but Xiao seemed relaxed and confident. With some hesitation, she joined him. Dao Ming smirked and said, "If you're scared already, just leave. You won't stand a chance." Annoyed, she called him out, saying he was obnoxious for trying to intimidate them like that. Dao Ming spread the cards dramatically, showing off his skills as if he was some kind of joker. At first, she and Xiao were thrilled, thinking they'd won, but then Dao Ming pulled out the ace of spades and they started to worry. Xiao accidentally messed up the cards in his nervousness, secretly slipping the ace into his pocket without them noticing. Unfortunately, he got caught, and she admitted defeat, asking what they wanted. Dao Ming's friends dragged Xiao off, leaving Dao Ming with her. She asked him what he wanted, and he simply pushed the table away and told her that all he wanted was for her to take him out to dinner. The next day, she went shopping with her mom, which made her late for her meeting with Dao Ming, who had been waiting for 4 hours in the rain. When she finally arrived, she asked him why he'd waited so long. As soon as he saw her, he hugged her tightly. She took him to eat at the cheapest restaurant she could find, though he had been expecting they'd go somewhere fancy or maybe up the tower. Every place they tried was closed. Finally, they took an elevator to go to a rooftop cafe, but the elevator was out of service, and they got stuck inside. His phone had died because he'd called her so many times, and her phone wasn't working either. They were left in silence until he fainted from a fever, which he'd gotten from waiting in the rain. She let him rest his head on her lap, covered him up, and took care of him as best as she could, while her family worried about her absence. The next morning, he woke up to see her sleeping beside him. She quickly stirred awake, reassuring him that he'd be fine and could go home soon where his mother would take care of him. But he shared that he hadn't seen his mother in years since she worked in London, and his father had passed away, leaving him to fend for himself. She felt sorry for him and realized why he acted out sometimes. She joked that he owed her now, which startled him, so she quickly clarified that she didn't mean it in any weird way. Just then, the maintenance workers opened the door, and they were rescued. Back at university, her friends asked where she'd been all night, and then someone informed her that Dao Ming was looking for her. When he showed up, he handed her a bag which she thought might be a gift, but it was just her jacket that she'd left behind. He draped it over her shoulders, and everyone assumed they'd spent the night together. Rumors spread that they were dating, and a girl who wanted to befriend her insisted they hang out together that night. At the nightclub, this new friend wanted to see if she'd introduce her to Daoming, assuming they weren't actually dating. To avoid the drama, she drank a little too much and suddenly spotted a foreign guy playing music, whom she mistook for Woozy. She sat next to him and told him she liked him. The next morning, she woke up in a strange hotel room, finding a message from the guy, named Thomas, who had left early, not wanting to wake her, and left his number in case she wanted to reach out. Embarrassed, she muttered to herself about how this could ruin her reputation, then headed to university. Her professor was waiting for her, demanding to know where she'd been, but she dodged him and ran off. Just then, Thomas messaged her, telling her he was at the university but wasn't sure where to meet her. She rushed out to find Thomas before he said anything to anyone. Just then, Daoming popped up and asked, "Looking for me?" She replied, "Do you think I have nothing else to do but deal with you?" He grinned and told her to sit down and eat since she looked faint. She started eating quickly to get away, but Thomas called, saying he was near the cafeteria, so she had to get up. But Daoming, suspicious, asked, "Are you talking to a guy or what?" She brushed him off, saying, "Move! You're not my investigator." When she saw Thomas, she tried to clarify what happened. He reassured her that nothing happened. He just helped her since she was drunk. However, he admitted he was happy when she said she liked him last night and wanted to get to know her better. Just then, Daoming showed up and demanded to know, "Who is this, and why are you with him?" She panicked, blurting out, "Oh, this is just my cousin." He was just looking for the restroom. But Daoming, still jealous, told Thomas, "I'm her boyfriend, so please back off." Surprised that she had a boyfriend, Thomas decided to leave. After he left, she turned to Daoming, frustrated, and snapped, "Boyfriend? Now you're making me your girlfriend too?" Daoming, hurt by her comment, walked off. Unfortunately, a photo of her and Thomas spread around, and rumors started about her playing the field with both Daoming and Thomas. She called Daoming to clarify the situation, but he wasn't answering. Daoming, still upset, was at the pool, venting his anger by swimming laps. His friends sensed something was wrong, and when they saw the photo, they confronted her to hear her side. She explained everything, including how the photo had been shared without her consent. Together, they tried to figure out a way to get the photo taken down. Just then, Daoming walked in, suspicious, and grabbed her laptop to see the photo himself. Furious, he stormed out, but as he was heading toward her, he accidentally got drenched when a girl on the stairs spilled a bucket of water on him. When he finally approached her, she told him she didn't care about the rumors as long as he trusted her. Daoming, frustrated, asked, "Since when do you care about my opinion?" But he was clearly upset, so he left to walk around, ending up at the spot where he'd waited for her in the rain. There, her friend Jing found him sitting alone. He was in such a daze he mistook her for his crush and let her take him home. When he finally snapped out of it, he tried to leave, but she begged him to stay. Jing was confused why he was so attached to someone with no wealth or outstanding looks, wondering if maybe he just wanted someone who would always be there for him. She even offered to be that person, but he told her not to compare herself to his girl and to let it go. Later, regretful for not trusting her, Daoming went to find her. He saw two guys trying to drag her somewhere and immediately stepped in, fighting them off and taking her home for safety. As he treated her wounds, she complained, "Can't you be a bit gentler, you brute?" He replied, "Is this how you thank me?" So she thanked him for helping, realizing he'd genuinely looked out for her. Then he asked if anything had happened between her and Thomas. She laughed, saying, "I don't even know him that well. How would anything happen between us?" Satisfied, he told her, "If something had happened, I would have been furious." She teased him, asking why he was so worked up, and he admitted, "Maybe it's because I like you or something." Shocked, she ran off, barely believing he'd actually said that. The next day, she went to confront her friend, only to discover it was her who had posted the picture of her and Thomas. The friend, feeling jealous, had even made sure Thomas would take her home that night. Though angry, she forgave her and admitted in class that the picture was posted by mistake. Later, Daoming came over with a new phone for her, but she refused it, saying she wanted her own back. He wouldn't return it and kept teasing her until Wozy showed up. Daoming announced, "She's my girlfriend now." Wozy asked if he was serious, and she quickly retorted, "Please, step aside." When she got home, she found that Daoming had sent her some new appliances, so she met him at a cafe to demand he take them back, jokingly asking if he thought she was marrying him or something. While she was there, Wozy showed up with a new girl, presumably his girlfriend. Feeling hurt, she left, confused as to how he could move on from Jing so easily. A few days later, she went to talk to him on the rooftop, and he asked if she was really dating Dao Ming. She said no, it was all his idea. He smiled, saying, "Good, then we should date instead." She was startled, so he added, "I'm kidding. But wouldn't it be fun to date secretly behind Dao Ming's back?" Confused by his playful advances, she started to walk away. He called after her, saying she looked even more beautiful lately. She left feeling puzzled, as if he had become a completely different person. One day, as she was leaving her lecture, Dao Ming suddenly appeared and dragged her to the airport, saying they were going on a trip. She was stunned and said, "Are you crazy? I didn't even tell my family." He replied that he had spoken to them and gotten their permission. Since it was just for the weekend, she reluctantly went along. On the plane, she was nervous and grabbed his arm during takeoff, only to quickly let go, embarrassed. When they arrived at the hotel with the whole crew, she was in awe of the view. Dao Ming casually said, "This is our room, but don't worry, we'll each have our own bed." He was respectful, only teasing her a little. As they got ready to sleep, he said, "Don't worry, I won't touch you as long as you don't have feelings for me." Then he lay down on his own bed, which was a bit small. She offered to switch beds, but he refused, saying, "If you want this bed, come sleep next to me." She hurried back to her own bed, feeling shy. Later that night, she couldn't sleep, so she went for a walk along the beach. There, she found Wozi sitting alone, and they talked. He asked if he could hug her for 5 minutes, saying he felt down. She replied, "Why don't you let your new girlfriend hug you instead?" He admitted he couldn't get close to someone he didn't love, and explained how his relationship with Jing had fallen apart. While he once thought she cared for him, he now realized she had changed completely. At that moment, Dao Ming was frantically looking for her, thinking she might have drowned. When he finally found her, she explained she'd just gone for a walk and had forgotten her phone. The next day, Wozi's girlfriend was gossiping, saying he had spent the entire night at the beach acting strangely. Someone asked him if he had run into Shanxi, and he admitted they'd bumped into each other. Meanwhile, Qimen and Meizu stumbled across news that Jing was getting married to a businessman in France. They realized this must have been the reason for Wozi's heartbreak. That evening, feeling bad for Wozi, Shanxi went to comfort him, crying as she reassured him that he'd eventually find someone who truly cared about him. In the middle of this, he moved closer to her, but just then Dao Ming arrived, furious, and hit him. She tried to explain that it wasn't what he thought, but Dao Ming stormed off, booked the next flight home, and left without her. Back at the university, Dao Ming coldly told Wozi they were no longer friends and ignored Shanxi as well. Later, she met Wozi on the rooftop, where she brought him food as a peace offering. She apologized, blaming herself for the whole mess. But Wozi told her it wasn't her fault and asked her out on a proper date. When he picked her up from her home, her family was delighted, especially her aunt and uncle, who were impressed by his charm. As they walked together, he admitted that this was his first real date with a girl, as he usually kept to himself. He apologized if he came off as boring, but she reassured him she enjoyed his company more than anyone else's. At one point, an older woman was almost hit by a cyclist, and Shanxi quickly stepped in to protect her, yelling at the cyclist. The man became rude and almost hit her, but another woman stepped in just in time and insisted on taking Shanxi to treat her injured hand. Shanxi was shocked to realize that the woman was Dao Ming's sister. She tried to escape before Dao Ming showed up, but his sister wouldn't let her go. Dao Ming walked in, saw Shanxi, and assumed she'd come to apologize. He angrily confronted her for leaving him like that, venting his frustration and demanding an explanation. Then his sister slapped him and told him, "That's not how you treat girls, you idiot." She was definitely a bit of a control freak, but she insisted that Shanxi join them for dinner and even have a drink. Although Shanxi wasn't used to alcohol and could barely stand the smell, she ended up spilling all her feelings, admitting that she didn't feel worthy of Dao Ming because of her mistake with Wozi. Dao Ming overheard everything and, feeling frustrated, joined her, upset that her actions had messed up their relationship. His sister comforted him, pointing out that Shanxi had shown courage that day by standing up for an elderly woman, and she ordered him to let Shanxi sleep in the guest room and treat her with more respect. Back at the university, Wozi tried talking to Dao Ming, but Dao Ming snapped, saying, "You still have the nerve to speak to me?" He then decided to kick Wozi out of their group and even offered his spot to Xia, Shanxi's friend. Shanxi tried to take responsibility, telling them it was all her fault and she didn't want their friendship to suffer. Wozi, however, believed the opposite. He knew he was the one who had messed things up. To settle things, Daoming challenged Wozi to a bridge game, but Shanxi stood by Wozi, deciding to play alongside him. She even went to Daoming's house and told him she wanted to learn the game and join as well. Daoming hugged her and said, "Just tell me you love me, and I'll cancel the game. I won't bother Wozi anymore." Unfortunately, she didn't feel that way about him, so she couldn't say it. Her only goal was to support Wozi and prevent him from losing his friends the way he'd lost Jing. She practiced with Wozi, and at one point he suddenly asked if she loved Daoming. She was taken aback, unsure how to respond. Then he asked, "Do you love me then?" Once again, she had no answer, so she told him to stop with these questions. She countered by asking if he still loved Jing. He replied, "Would you believe me if I said I don't think about her as much anymore?" When they arrived at the university to start the game, Shanxi and Wozi held hands, which infuriated Daoming, who asked, "Are you two going to stay holding hands the entire time?" They all agreed that if Wozi and Shanxi won, Daoming would forgive them, but if they lost, Shanxi would leave the university. The game began, and they won the first 2 rounds. They were even confident they'd win the last one, but Daoming began to worry and decided to forfeit. Shanxi was thrilled to win, though Daoming claimed he would have won if he hadn't withdrawn. She couldn't understand why he forfeited, but Wozi pointed out the obvious. Daoming didn't want her to leave the university. Later, at Daoming's house, his sister invited everyone over. Meizu and Qimen were reminiscing about their exes, and they jokingly asked Shanxi if she remembered any of her ex's numbers, but she admitted she'd never dated anyone before. His sister teasingly asked Shanxi how far she'd gone with Wozi, and she replied that they'd only gone on 1 date. Daoming's sister decided to give them a private room to talk, which Wozi agreed to, as he had many things to ask her. Inside, he tried to explain that he liked her but wasn't in love with her, admitting that he was still trying to get over Jing and wasn't ready to move forward. He acknowledged that his friends were right. He was interested in Shanxi because he was struggling to forget Jing. Shanxi reassured him that her only concern was his happiness, and she didn't mind staying his close friend forever. He gently patted her head, thanking her for understanding. Meanwhile, outside, Daoming heard Meizu say, "I wonder what Shanxi and Wozi are doing alone in that room." Feeling jealous and wanting answers, he asked his sister where they were. She calmly told him they were upstairs together, but to her surprise, Daoming didn't storm off or cause a scene. He just stayed quietly stewing in his thoughts. The next day, Daoming's friend came to talk to him and admitted that years ago, he had wronged Wozi by taking his toy by force and had even wanted to bring his friends to bully him. Surprisingly, Wozi hadn't gotten mad back then, so Daoming now wanted to return the favor and let go of Shanxi. He met her at the university to return her books, which left her wondering at his sudden change of heart. Meanwhile, Wozi also intended to step back from Shanxi because Daoming was his old friend, but he didn't want to tell him right away, wanting him to suffer a little and understand her value. One day, Daoming announced to his friends that he was moving to London to settle there. Wozi overheard and told him, "Don't worry, I'm not leaving because of you." At that moment, Shanxi came in, visibly upset by Daoming's departure, so he decided to tease her more by saying, "Here's your chance to date him freely. I don't mind." She walked off in frustration, wishing he'd go off and enjoy himself with the blondes in London. She had recently started working at a Frankie's restaurant, and while she was distracted by thoughts of Daoming's words, she accidentally burned herself. Tian, her co-worker, rushed over to put some gauze and cotton on her burn. Suddenly, a girl told her that there was a man outside who was causing a scene and refusing to leave until he saw her. Frankie, the manager, told Daoming this was a place of work and he couldn't act like that, and Shanxi tried to say the same to get him to leave. But Daoming grabbed her hand and Frankie asked, "Who are you exactly to take her away?" Another fight almost broke out, but Shanxi stopped it, telling Daoming to quit his behavior. Annoyed, he called himself an idiot for coming to say goodbye before leaving, then walked away, determined not to return. At the airport, Wozi went to say something important to Daoming before he boarded. On the plane, Daoming fumed quietly, even wanting to leave mid-flight, but his sister slapped him, asking, "Where do you think you're going? This isn't bus number 6. When they arrived in London, Daoming was stomping around, wanting to go back after Wozi admitted nothing had happened between him and Shanxi, and that he'd realized she actually loved Daoming. Daoming tried calling Shanxi at the restaurant, saying her dad wanted her home urgently, but when she found out it was him, she hung up. She thought he should enjoy himself in London instead. The next day at work, Everyone was tense because Tian had a big cooking test that day, and he had to prepare fish. He'd left the food on the stove too long, so it was ruined, and time was running out before the chef came to taste it. Shanxi stepped in to help him save the dish, but the sauce would take way too long to prepare. She remembered once using cameo leaves as a substitute for sauce and suggested Tian buy some quickly while she started fixing the dish. She rushed out to buy the leaves, but on her way back, someone bumped into her, causing her to drop them, and another person even stepped on them. Luckily, she found a lady selling cameo leaves and bought some in time. She returned to the restaurant just as the chef came to taste the food, and thankfully, the chef loved the dish. The next day, Tian went to buy cameo leaves from the shop he frequented and noticed Shanxi's card. Apparently, she hadn't been able to pay for the leaves because they were too expensive, so she had left her card as collateral until she could come back and pay later. The shop assistant mentioned to him that she had also been in an accident recently, which made her seem even more admirable in his eyes. To thank her, Tian invited her to a meal, and they talked about their lives. He told her that his mother had passed away and that he lived with his father but was fighting hard to get through life. He felt they were similar, both struggling through hardships. After dinner, he walked her home and asked her to stay by his side whenever he was cooking. Of course, she took it as helping him in the kitchen, but then Daoming showed up and interrupted, saying, "Oh, sweetie, he doesn't just want you to help him cook, he wants you as his future girlfriend." He added that before she got too invested, she should know that Tian was the heir to a huge Chinese pharmaceutical company and was only pretending to be poor. She felt deceived by Tian's pretense and told him he had trivialized her own struggles. Tian explained he wasn't trying to downplay her difficulties. He was simply trying to fight back against his father. Daoming then barged into her home, claiming he'd come back from London to save her from being fooled. When her mother came out to welcome Daoming, her father was delighted to see him as well and offered him to rest in the guest room. But Daoming confidently walked into Shanxi's room instead. She told him to get off her bed and stop taking over her space, but he just shrugged, saying, "What if I get thirsty? Who's going to bring me water?" He teased her further, asking if she'd held Tian's hand. Shanxi denied it and told him to back off. The next day, as Shanxi was changing in the bathroom, Daoming walked in without knocking, as if it were a barn, and even her mother came in after. Seeing them in an awkward position, her mom decided to lock the door on them, playfully saying, "Oops." Later at the restaurant, Shanxi helped Tian again. He explained the misunderstanding, saying he only wanted people to value him for who he was, not for his wealth. She understood his point and wasn't angry anymore. When Shanxi got home, her family was in a frenzy because her father had lost 1,000,000 yuan in an investment and faced jail time if they couldn't pay it back. Her mother was crying, not caring about wealth but worried that he wouldn't be there with them. Daoming saw her mom crying and decided to help, handing Shanxi his credit card. She refused, but he asked if she wanted her dad to go to jail, insisting she could pay it back later. Shanxi, unsure how she could repay such a huge amount, hesitated, so Daoming told her to meet him after university the next day. After class, she went to his place and he stepped closer, suggesting a faster way to repay him. She slapped him, tearfully saying, "I'm an honorable woman. Take your money. I don't need it." He laughed, telling her to stop thinking the worst of him. His plan was for her to enter a cooking competition where the winner would receive 1,000,000 yuan. As she looked over the entry requirements, he kept teasing her and pulled her closer, making her realize just how manipulative he could be. Then he told her to pay him back, but not to forget the interest. She asked how much he wanted, but all he requested was a kiss on the cheek. Honestly, if it were me, I'd slap him and run. But she kissed him quickly and ran off, still playing the role of the helpless damsel. His sister decided to help train her more for the competition, since she also worked in the culinary field, and even invited her to stay with them for a while, a real recovery retreat for her. At night, he would gaze at her beauty while she slept, deprived of her presence during the day. She started cooking for him to taste her dishes, feeling like she'd become a top chef. But one day, Tian told her that his father wanted him to marry a rich girl named Saina who loved him, though he didn't feel the same way. It turned out Saina was also entering the competition to impress him, which made Shanxi feel like she'd never win. She packed her bags and tried to leave Daoming's house, but he stopped her and said, "Where do you think you're going? You're just using this as an excuse to run away." She told him to stay out of it, that she'd pay him back the money since she wouldn't win anyway and was letting everyone down. He responded, "By doing this, you're disappointing me too." He dragged her to his room, but she resisted. He reassured her, saying, "Come on, I'm not going to kidnap you," and brought her some water. Then he suggested they play a bit, but with honorable intentions, just a card game. When she lost, he drew on her face but stopped as he watched her close her eyes, savoring the moment. Suddenly, he leaned in and told her to have more confidence. He was certain she could win the competition. As he got close, he realized she was even more beautiful up close. The next morning, he tried to take a picture of her while she was sleeping so he could tease her later. When she woke up and found out, she yelled at him, demanding he delete the awful photo. On the day of the competition, she was ready, and Dowming and his friends sat watching, confident in her abilities. The judges tasted each dish to decide who would make it to the next round, choosing 6 contestants, including Shang-Chi. In the next round, they had to prepare pastries. Sina's pastries impressed the judges, but when they tasted Shang-Chi's, they found them unusual. She remembered Daoming's sister's advice to be confident, so she told the judges her recipe was inspired by a woman who made it for her sick husband, filled with the care and love she put into it. Moved, the judges appreciated her personal touch and announced the 3 finalists, including Shang-Chi. The final round was tougher. They had only 45 minutes to finish the dish. Shang-Chi felt anxious, but Daoming, in his usual loud way, encouraged her to focus and pick her ingredients quickly, since time was running out. After the judges tasted each dish, they were impressed by Sina's recipe, but found Shang-Chi's dish to be a simple one that anyone could make. Unfortunately, Sina was announced as the first-place winner. However, the judges made an exception this time and awarded Shang-Chi 500,000 yuan for her hard work and impressive cooking skills. Shang-Chi was ecstatic, thanking everyone who supported her. At Daoming's house, they celebrated together. Shang-Chi thanked them all for their support, and Daoming decided to ask her out for the next day in front of everyone. Embarrassed by the public invitation, she suggested they all go out as a group, but one by one the others made excuses to leave them alone. Daoming turned to her and said, "See, looks like I'm the only one left for you." The next day, she was on her way to meet him but saw a young boy who had fallen. She helped him up and he handed her a note from his mom, who happened to be her neighbor. The note explained that his mother had to leave for work and asked if she could look after him. He commented that not only was she late, but she'd brought a kid along. She apologized, asking him to put up with it for a while, so they took the boy to the zoo. Daoming realized she was more focused on the boy than him, which made him feel a little neglected. At one point, the boy commented on how ugly a monkey looked, and Daoming joked, "Not as ugly as you," but was kind enough to carry the boy on his shoulders so he could see the animals better. When the boy eventually fell asleep, she tried to take his teddy bear so he could rest comfortably. She then asked Daoming why he always helped her and spent time with her. Exasperated, he finally blurted out, "I'm honestly tired of dealing with your cluelessness," and walked off, leaving her with the boy. He was probably right, if only she'd understood him better. At work later, her boss sent her to meet a group of handsome customers who wanted something from her. She tried to brush them off, saying she was busy, but they insisted on helping her with her tasks in exchange for a favor. They charmed the girls into coming in to shop, proving that good looks are excellent marketing. Because of the high sales that day, she and her friend received a bonus. Her friends teased her about coming with them to Canada, saying she had no excuse now, but she hesitated, thinking about her argument with Daoming and how awkward it would be to run into him there. That night, Daoming called her, mentioning he'd heard she was planning to go to Canada and telling her he didn't think she should go unless he was going too. She replied that he should mind his own business and posted a photo with her friend, adding a caption about how nice it was that annoying people weren't coming along. Determined to keep her friends from crashing her trip, she hinted to them that her dad hadn't exactly paid for this, so they couldn't just barge in, but they cheekily responded, "No problem, we'll tell him you invited us." When they arrived in Canada, guess who they saw waiting for them? Yes, Daoming himself. He smirked and said, "If you don't like it, you can always go home." She stayed silent, glaring at him, and they continued with the trip while her friend teased them to stop the cheap flirting. Later that night, she was playing a game, and Daoming was surprised she still played it. She then remembered that Sherry, her friend, hadn't returned from outside, so she went to ask Woozy about her. Although he didn't know where Sherry was, she saw that some of the guys seemed to know something but were trying to hide it, saying that Sherry had just gone out for a walk and they hadn't seen her since. Since then, she went out searching for Sherry with Woozy, but Sherry was actually with Shaimin and Mizu. Meanwhile, Daoming sensed something was wrong when she suddenly stopped playing her game. Woozy returned alone, thinking that maybe Chance had already found Sherry and brought her back, but soon discovered that wasn't the case. Sherry was safe, but the real problem was that a snowstorm was coming. Daoming rushed out to look for Chance, and when he found her, she was lying on the ground, her clothes soaked from the snow. He picked her up and took her to a cabin where they could spend the night. He gave her his jacket, then went outside to gather some wood to start a fire. Back at the lodge, Woozy was furious with the others for putting her in danger by making her go out into the storm, and he even threw wine in their faces, threatening to kick them out. In the cabin, Chance was still freezing because her clothes were wet. Daoming, realizing this could worsen her condition, took off his own clothes and asked her to do the same. He turned away to give her some privacy, then wrapped her in a blanket with him, just to keep her warm. Although she was hesitant, she knew he wasn't thinking anything inappropriate. He just wanted to keep her from freezing. The next day, the rescue team found them and joked, "Looks like we came at a bad time." Daoming carried her back to the lodge, confronted the troublemakers, and declared it was time for some consequences. He wanted to throw them out, but they begged Chance for forgiveness, saying they had nowhere else to go. She allowed them to stay if they helped clean the house. Later, when they were resting, Daoming's friends teased him about how they had spent the night in the cabin, hinting that it must have been like a romantic movie. Shimin and Mizu couldn't resist making jokes, with Mizu saying, "Hold me in your arms, my love." Daoming blushed and hurried off, only to be teased again for going to the wrong side of the bathroom. That night, they were celebrating New Year's, and Daoming finally got a moment alone with her. He hinted that he wanted her to tell him something, but she, being clueless, thought he was asking for the remaining $500,000 she owed him. Frustrated, he told her to just keep living in her bubble of ignorance. When the fireworks went off, he confessed his feelings. Even though she didn't really hear him, it felt good to finally get it off his chest. One day, they had a reunion with their high school friends, where she ran into Jiabao, who had a crush on her back then. He complimented her, saying she looked even more beautiful now. Daoming was initially unaware, but Shimin pointed out that Chance and Sherry were at a party with their friends and had even posted a photo. Daoming showed up at the party uninvited, not letting her breathe for a moment. During a drinking game, Jiabao noticed she was uncomfortable and was about to take her drink for her, playing this chivalrous act. However, Daoming stepped in, took the drink from her and said, "Why would you drink something so disgusting?" Jiabao, surprised, asked him who he was, and Daoming replied, "I'm her boyfriend. Do you have a problem?" Chance quickly clarified that he wasn't her boyfriend, and Jiabao, putting an arm around her, told Daoming he should back off if he was bothering her. Daoming brushed Jiabao's arm off and pulled her aside to talk. However, when he started insulting her friends, calling them annoying, she told him to watch his words and not disrespect them. Even Jiabao stood up for her, saying, "If we're that annoying, maybe you should leave." Daoming lashed out and ended up getting into a fight, eventually landing in the hospital. Chance was furious, slapped him, and told him he'd crossed the line. She said if he thought her friends were annoying, then he must see her the same way, and honestly, she had a point. His friends scolded him too, telling him he needed to apologize to her since he had overreacted. The next time he saw her, she was talking to Shimin, and he instructed Shimin to apologize to her as soon as she approached. Daoming called out to her, but she ignored him, clearly not planning to forgive him so easily. Later, in the library, she struggled to reach a book on a high shelf, but just then, she saw Jiabao's younger brother, Sean Bing, and was delighted to run into him. Sean Bing told her he hadn't seen her in ages, not since she used to deliver food to their house. He always liked seeing her around until he heard Daoming talking about her, mocking her as dumb, and saying he could never fall for someone like her. Sean Bing couldn't hold back and called Daoming an idiot. She quickly pulled Sean away before a fight could break out. Later, they were eating together when Daoming walked by. Sean decided to annoy him by chatting with her more intensely, reassuring her she didn't need to worry about Daoming, as he'd protect her. Just then, Daoming came over, saying, "Oh, so you're hanging around with a guy like this now?" She snapped, telling him once again to stay out of her life. Sean, still angry, said, "She's my girlfriend. Why do you care?" Daoming grabbed Sean by his shirt and they almost fought, but she intervened to stop them. As they were leaving, Daoming told her he'd never stop loving her, no matter how much she pushed him away. Sean just laughed and said, "He's crazy. You should ignore him." One day she was out with Sean Bing, who advised her to stay away from Dao Ming, saying his behavior was out of line. Although she knew he was overprotective sometimes, she believed Dao Ming had a good heart. Sean went to get her a drink, but while he was away, some men approached her. When he returned, she was gone. Xiao and Dao Ming's friends noticed her absence and informed him that she was missing. She had been kidnapped, and they sent Dao Ming a photo showing her tied up and beaten. Sean Bing recognized the gang and asked to speak with them alone. It turned out he had connections with them, but the gang leader had an old grudge against Dao Ming because he once broke his leg. They wanted revenge, but assured her they wouldn't harm her. They only wanted Dao Ming to suffer. The gang leader sent Dao Ming the photo, threatening that they would deal with her if he didn't come. Although she doubted he'd come since they weren't in a relationship, Dao Ming showed up, ordering them to stay away from her. They beat him badly until the police arrived. When she woke up in the hospital, Wuzi was sitting silently nearby. When she entered the room, they told her Dao Ming had died. She broke down crying, regretting everything that had happened. Then Dao Ming suddenly laughed, saying, "Who visits a patient without bringing some fruit?" Furious, she jumped on him, wanting to strangle him for scaring her like that. His friends laughed and left them to argue alone. When she calmed down, he teased her for just sitting there, stunned. She admitted she regretted what had happened to him and had even dreamed about him. He said, "Then come visit me every day." She retorted that she wasn't his personal nurse, but he laughed, saying he'd pay her a good salary if she came. Annoyed, she told him he was always thinking about money. One day, she was on the rooftop with Wuzi, who noticed her wound looked infected. He put a bandage on it for her. Just then, Dao Ming arrived, commenting on how cozy they looked. Wuzi stood up, saying, "I didn't tell her what you wanted me to, tell her yourself," leaving them alone. Dao Ming finally told her his birthday was coming up and that she needed to bring a gift and dress nicely because his mother would be at the party and he wanted them to meet. On his birthday, his friends caught her and insisted on helping her find an outfit suitable for the occasion. After all, there would be politicians and business people there, as his mother would be looking to make some important connections. As the party began, people were giving him extremely expensive gifts. She started to feel out of place, like her own gift was worthless. She tried to avoid handing it over, but someone pulled her hand awkwardly and it fell to the ground. His mother arrived just then, and Dao Ming helped her up, introducing her to his mother as the girl he loved. His mother was stunned and asked if he realized what he was saying. She couldn't believe he'd choose someone without a family background or connections. Wuzi quickly lied, saying her father was a company executive responsible for projects in North Africa and the UAE. Sensing the lie, Dao Ming's mother asked her to play the piano, assuming if she was truly wealthy, she'd know how to play. Nervous since she hadn't played in ages, she went to the piano and started playing. To everyone's surprise, she played beautifully. After finishing, she admitted that she wasn't from a wealthy family, and that all she could offer was this simple song. His mother was offended by her audacity and wanted her to leave. Dao Ming, angered by his mother's reaction, decided to leave with her. He grabbed Shimon's car keys and walked out, even though his mother warned he'd regret it. They drove to a hotel his family owned, wanting privacy to talk. He confided in her that he wasn't close to his mother because he barely saw her and that he wouldn't let her interfere in his life. She was surprised he was telling her all of this. He explained that she was everything to him, and it was only natural to share things like this with her. Then, as they watched the stars together, he moved closer, almost hugging her, and asked if she had thought about her feelings for him. She still felt unsure, wondering why he would choose her out of all the other girls, as she felt ordinary and lacked any special talents. He smiled and said, "Maybe you're just one of a kind in my eyes." She blushed at his silly comment and hesitated to give him her gift. Finally, she gathered the courage and presented it, a box of homemade pastries shaped to match his various moods, like when he was angry or happy. He said he would have been even happier if she'd given it to him sooner. She still felt it was a simple gift, but to him it held far more meaning. Later, Dao Ming's mother showed up at her family's home, offering them 5 million yuan to make her leave him. Her mother was outraged and refused to let someone come in and try to buy her daughter's love. Her father intervened, saying it was rude to treat a guest that way, but he jokingly threatened to throw water on her as well, so Dao Ming's mother left feeling frustrated. However, she wasn't done yet. She decided to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. She dragged her son to attend a proposal to a rich, beautiful girl, hoping he would realize he could do better. but even the girl was hesitant about the marriage. At that moment, Chansey walked in to serve food. Daoming's mother had planned this to humiliate her, saying, "He's marrying someone rich and beautiful, not someone like you." However, the girl Xiaoju rejected the proposal herself and walked out. Daoming followed, but in his confusion, he accidentally grabbed Xiaoju instead of Chansey and rushed her out of the room. Once outside, he turned to see her and exclaimed, "Who are you?" She snapped, "You're the one who dragged me out here." Then she playfully grabbed him and bit his ear. The next day, Chansey went to congratulate him on his engagement, calling him immature for claiming to love her and then choosing a wealthy girl. He couldn't explain himself and just watched her leave. Outside, she ran into Xiaoju, who admitted she didn't want to marry him either, but after what he did, she started to like him. She loved relationships that began with a bit of hate. Just then, Daoming showed up, clearly annoyed, and wanted to argue with her about biting him the day before. But Xiaoju said, "I'm interested in you now, so get ready, we're getting married soon." Then Xiaoju grabbed Chansey for coffee. Her real intention was to propose a plan. Since she was intrigued by Daoming but still unsure of him, she asked Chansey to help her test him. She suggested that Chansey try to attract him to see if he was truly faithful. If he didn't fall for it, then it meant he really loved Chansey. But if he did, they would both leave him, seeing him as fickle and easily swayed by any girl, since his relationship with Chansey started with hatred and turned into love. It could easily happen again with Xiaoju if their relationship began with dislike. Later, Chansey told Daoming she'd met with Xiaoju and found her to be smart, sincere, and beautiful. She admitted that maybe his mother was right in choosing her as a match, and that he should be happy if he promised to marry her. Daoming felt anxious because it seemed like Chansey wasn't interested in him anymore, and he walked away, hurt. A few days later, Xiaoju met Chansey with a huge grin and hugged her, announcing, "Daoming agreed to date me." She asked Chansey if she thought he would forget her so quickly, and if Xiaoju could really replace her. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll see what happens next.